Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session. My name is Don Carnevale. I'm the Director of Corporate Marketing here at Neosystems. We're here today to talk about Costpoint BI or Cognos Analytics data modules. Joining me today is Tawfiq Habibi, Director of Business Intelligence here at Neosystems. Tawfiq, great to see you.
Hi, Don. How's it going?
Going very well, thank you. Let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda for today's session. First, I'm going to talk a little bit very briefly about who Neosystems is for those of you who are not familiar with us. We have four main lines of business and how we support the government contracting community. The first area is what we call here that upper right quadrant, the systems integration area, our professional services group, where we perform all kinds of implementation upgrades, system reviews, and certainly business intelligence and change management for a very purpose-built set of partners, including Deltek, SAP Concur, Workday Adaptive Planning, and others. So we've got a whole set of professional services that we're able to offer our clients. Secondly is our managed services area, which is where we got our start 20 years ago. We perform outsourced services around accounting, human capital, payroll, and IT services. Now, we also have our own secure hosting service that meets all the NIST, ITAR, and SOC 1 and SOC 2 requirements. And then finally, our newest line of business in managed security focuses around CMMC compliance, supply chain readiness, and security program management. And that includes secure enclaves, which allow you to put your data in a very safe place in the systems as well. So now let's go take a look at that agenda. So we're going to talk today. First, we're going to talk what are data modules, just get a baseline for what those are. We're going to highlight some of the main features that are important regarding those, and then talk briefly about why data modules, why to use those, why are they important, and then Tawfiq will walk us through a live demo about how to create a data module. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand off to Tawfiq. Tawfiq?
Thanks, Don. Welcome, everybody. I recognize a few names from the participants, so good to see you. Glad to see you guys be able to join us today. I'm definitely not going to do death by PowerPoint here, so just a handful of slides and just do some definitions, and then we're going to jump into a live demo. But what are data modules? They are basically self-service web-based data modeling. They are somewhat equivalent to Framework Manager, and it offers some of the capabilities that Framework Manager provides. I'm assuming a lot of folks might be familiar with Framework Manager, but that is what we call the metadata layer, or basically the data about your data. This is where you explain how Cognos, explain to Cognos how the database is set up, and how all the tables that are related in your source system are integrated. And then you publish the packages that we all are familiar with, like the general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, projects, and such. But this is just kind of like a web-based version of Framework Manager. A data module can be based on data servers. These are source direct connections to databases. They can be based on packages that you already have. You can also base them on uploaded files, which are typically external data, maybe data not readily available in your source system. You can also use data sets, which is another topic we can discuss at some point. And you can also use other data modules. So you can have data modules that are based on other data modules. So as you can see, you get a whole menu of possible data sources that you can use to build a data module that can become a data source for your reports and or dashboards inside of Cognos. So here's a kind of a subset of some of the features of data modules. They allow you to join tables across multiple databases. It might be possible that you have data in a SQL Server database and another data coming out of an Oracle database, for example, or you might have a CRM system and an ERP system, and you want to be able to report off of both at the same time. You can join those tables across multiple databases. You can have additional derivation of data. You can build simple or complex calculations. You can apply filters. Also within data modules, you can create aliases, views, you can do unions, and even join virtual tables that you create. The tables can be secured using group and role and data element security. Of course, with the latest version of Cognos Analytics, IBM has embedded AI or artificial intelligence, and there are some smarts in there when you do import data, for example, from your data sources. It'll try to build the relationships and try to understand your data, if you will, and help you with that modeling. It also does automatic joint detection. It'll look for commonality between the tables and define the joins for you automatically. And of course, you can override and change those. And then another feature is this easy integration of Excel data. Everybody uses Excel. Everybody exports data from other systems in Excel format. You can use that data integrated with your other enterprise data and take advantage of it inside of your data modules. So why? One of the first bullets I put in there, and I see that, but I don't think it's official yet, and that's why I left question marks right after that. Is it a replacement from Framework Manager? Each iteration of data modules has been through the releases, has added more and more Framework Manager capabilities. Web-based, right? So data modules are web-based. It avoids the Framework Manager desktop client requirement. And of course, since everybody is moving to the cloud, it is better suited for cloud-hosted solutions. Right now, you have to go through a whole bunch of gyrations if you are hosted in the cloud, regardless of where you are. But if you wanted to do any custom metadata modeling or use Framework Manager, you almost always have to use something like Citrix or Remote Desktop to launch that Windows client and do your Framework Manager work, your data modeling. Obviously, data modules will give you the flexibility to do this from within your web browser, and you don't have to rely on any other third-party solutions or quirky implementations, if you will. And another reason is the flexibility that data modules give you. You can combine multiple different types of sources into one data module, for example. You can also use data modules to segregate your data for a specific subject area or a target audience. So for example, you can create data modules that only provide data for a certain organization within the group or a department within your organization. You might want to use that to simplify the reporting capability for your power users. So that gives you the maximum flexibility to actually create subject areas, if you will, within your enterprise reporting solution. Okay, so I promised you no death by PowerPoint, so I'm going to jump right into my live environment here, and we'll switch out to Cognos. Hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. And I'm just logged into my demo environment here. For our demo for data modules, I am going to use uploaded files today, just in the interest of brevity and because I have limited time to cover what I need to cover. But I'm logged into a Cognos demo environment, and I am going to click on New and then select the option to create a data module. And the first thing I see when I do that is Cognos will launch a window that asks me to select data sources. And I can select uploaded files by going through my content or team content. I can also click on data servers, and here my demo environment is connected to Costpoint. So if I click on Costpoint, I will get a list of all the tables that I can pick from and load, or time and expense, or any other setup or data server that has been set up. I can use that as a data source. But for today, I'm going to just use my uploaded files. And what I have done here for our demo today, I've actually taken data extracts from a Costpoint source system and created separate Excel files, one representing my chart of accounts, one representing my general ledger detail, one representing my general ledger Postsum. I have some labor history data here that we'll use a little bit later, and then my org list and my project master list as well. So quickly, I can just import all of the files that I need. So I'm going to control click accounts, general ledger detail, Postsum, org, and proj. And if for those of you that may be not familiar, the general ledger detail and the general ledger Postsum are what we call your fact tables, and then your account and your org and your project tables are going to be what we call your attributes or dimensions. That gives you more detail or more demographic data about your accounts, org, and proj. So I'm going to bring in those 5 tables by control clicking them and then clicking OK. And now Cognos will open up the data module interface and present me with the files in my data modules and the files that I imported from my selection. As you can see, account, GL detail, Postsum, org, and proj came in. And in the middle of the screen here, I just have 3 tabs. One is called the grid, one is called relationships, and one is called custom tables. The grid does nothing more than show you a sampling of that data that you just uploaded. So if I click on my account list here, you'll see that I get all the columns in the table that I imported with some of the data that was included in that file. I can click on GL detail and explore that data as well. I can look at my orgs and I can look at my projects and the GL Postsum as well. Okay. If I click on relationships, this shows you a picture of your layout of your data module. Right now, all of my files have brought in manually pretty much, and there are no relationships or no joins between them. So we are actually going to define some joins here in a couple of minutes to make our data module useful, if you will. And then across the top here, you'll see a property sheet that lets you explore the properties of items. And you can also have the validation here, so you can validate your data module as you go along. And then we also have the try it option here, which lets you take your data module for a test drive and see how it's going to work from an end user standpoint. So when you click on try it, Cognos will launch the report authoring tool in a mini version of it and let you play around with your data module to see how it works. If you expand the individual tables, you'll see here, these are all the columns that we brought in. And you can also see that we also have different items in here that we can use or choose not to use or rename or reorganize. Okay, if we look at the GL Postsum, we have some of the key fields that were brought in. We have our account, org, project ID, fiscal year, period, and so on and so forth. Okay, so as a data modeler, you want to obviously have an objective at the end of the day here with creating a data module that hopefully will ease the reporting capabilities for the users. And this will become a data source for general ledger type data reporting. So you can do some of the things, I'll walk you through some of the things that I'm going to do to kind of enhance this data module and make it a little bit more useful. I'm a little OCD, obviously, so I will move my general ledger Postsum table up here and then move the general ledger detail under it. And then I'll have my account, org, and project tables in here. This is basically what my users are going to see when I use the dashboard, the data module in a report or a dashboard. So I can come in here and do all sorts of things like create new calculations, define relationships, apply filters, create folders, derive additional tables, do things like hide stuff from users, even remove a table if it is no longer useful to me. I can do some renaming. So instead of doing this with the Excel extension, I can give this a proper name. We'll rename this one as well. Okay. Oops. Good old undo. Rename. So we'll call that one accounts. And we'll rename this one orgs. And projects. Okay. I'm going to expand GL PostSummary. I could come in here, for example, I know that end users maybe are not too familiar or don't need to really be bothered, for example, with key fields. So I can come in here and control click these columns, click on the more button and hide from users. so that when I run or use the data module, my users are not bothered with the noise that would generate. They don't have to deal with those types of keys. I can come in here and, for example, modify some of these fields. Again, maybe rename them to give them, and I'm not going to rename each one of those, but give them business-friendly names. And let's rename this one here. Okay. You also see here that fiscal year code is a string. As we know in Costpoint, period number here, Cognos determined that was a numeric value that it should summarize. Obviously, period number and subperiod are actually not measures that you would roll up. They actually tend to be more like attributes. So if we need to change those values, we can open up the property sheet here and basically come in here and change that usage from a measure into an attribute, and change the aggregate. And you'll see here that the icon changed next to the period number. And I'll do the same thing to the subperiod. So we'll change that from measure into attribute. Obviously, as you can see here, you have to have kind of knowledge of the underlying data. You have to have an understanding of databases and joins and some of those technical background things. But if you do, and you've done any modeling before, hopefully you'll see how this tool can be used to actually extend that functionality and let you derive additional data from your source systems. So again, we can organize things, we can change things around, we can change them to business friendly, we can define or change properties and attributes of a lot of these fields. We can also create our own calculations and derive additional data. But now I want to make this the relationship here between all of these tables to enhance my reporting a little bit more user-friendly. So what I need to do is define the relationship between GL PostSummary and GL Detail, and also connect the projects, organizations, and accounts between all of those tables. So I'm going to click on GL PostSummary, control-click on GL Detail, and if I right-click on my interface here, I can come in here and define a relationship between those two fields. Now, I just happen to know from looking at the data dictionary what the relationship is between GL PostSummary and GL Detail. And basically what it is the join between source key and GL PostSum source key. And it is between level 1 and level 1, level 2 and level 2, and level 3 and GLP sum level 3 key. And you also, as I click on these fields, you'll see here I get sampling of what they need to look like. And then all I have to do is click on match the selected columns, and Cognos matched the 4 columns together. And if I hit refresh here, it shows you the columns lined up between GL PostSummary and GL Detail. The relationship here is defined by default as an inner join with a one-to-many. And you can also change some settings for that join definition. I typically, in the general ledger ERP system, you're not going to have a GL Detail entry without a GL PostSummary entry. I think your numbers will be out of shape. So an inner join in this instance is okay. A one-to-many relationship, you can have a GL PostSummary entry that is made up of multiple GL Detail entries that roll up. And then you can do some optimization here. If you have a lot of data, you can do no filtering at all, or you can filter on unique values or a range of values. You can create subqueries and such. For our purposes here, we're going to stick with the default, and we're going to click OK. And now we have a relationship between GL PostSummary and GL Detail. And then we're going to define a little bit more information. If you look at the GL PostSummary, we have information about account, org, and project, but we don't really know what an account name is, what an organization is, or a project name is, or a project type. So all of these attributes are in our what we call dimension tables. So ultimately, I need to connect all of these 3 tables to my GL PostSummary. So again, I can ease that reporting requirement from the end user standpoint. So I'll click on projects, control click GL PostSummary. right click and create a new relationship. And I know that I can take projects from projects and project ID from GL PostSummary and match those two columns together. Okay, refresh. And you'll see here that it also defined a one-to-many relationship that is an inner join. Now, I happen to know also that when you enter a GL transaction, project ID is not a required field. So if I leave this as an inner join, there's a potential that I'm going to leave out some records where project ID was not required for a particular transaction. Again, I'm intimating here that you need to have knowledge and understanding of the underlying data and how the system works, how Costpoint actually works and updates and refreshes data. So this is going to generate some erroneous data if I leave it as is. So I'm going to make that a right outer join. Okay. And click on a refresh. Okay. And you'll see here now Cognos refresh the list or the join between those two fields. And you'll see I do have some instances now where my project ID is not required and I have null values. Okay. Click OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for orgs and GL PostSummary. So I'll define a relationship there. And the join field there is going to be org ID to org ID. I'll match these up. Click on refresh. It is going to be a one-to-many relationship, right? One account or one org or one project can have many transactions in my general ledger summary data. So it is a one-to-many relationship. I do know, again, in Costpoint that an org ID is a required field when you do general ledger transactions. So I'm feeling confident that I can leave that as an inner join as well. So I will click OK on this one. And we'll do one more and join these two fields again by clicking on a relationship. Oops. I think I click accounts and then GL PostSummary relationship. And this one here, we're going to take account ID and we're going to join it to account ID from GL PostSummary. And I also happen to know that when you do a general ledger transaction, account ID is a required field. I'm not going to have null values, so I'm confident in leaving this as an inner join. But again, it's a one-to-many in that an account could have multiple general ledger entries in the system. So now I've built my data module, and actually I can now take it for a test drive to see what it looks like. So I'm going to click on the Try It button here, and Cognos will launch Report Studio. Okay. And it's going to be a mini version of Report Studio. It opens up the data module here. I didn't name my data module, so it still says new data module, but I'm in a testing phase. But as you can see here, did I hide the table? Where's projects? Projects was hidden, right, from users. So we don't see that table here. So that's a mistake I made. I need to do the projects, so I expose projects so I can show that to users. So I'm going to come back here and show to users. And I might as well save this data module as well. So I'm going to save that under my content. We're just going to call it my Webby DMs and click on save. Let Cognos save it. All right, I'm going to try it again. We're going to launch Report Studio Mini. And now the data module that I called Webby DM is listed. Here's my GL posting summary. If you recall, I hid some of the key fields, so they are not visible to the users. They don't see them here. They only see what I have chosen to show them. You'll see that the names that we changed and used are actually now the names that are in the system. And you can see all of the tables in here. I haven't hidden or renamed any of these fields, so they appear to the end user, but we could have hidden all of that superfluous noise and just kind of simplified things for end users. So let's take this GL PostSummary data module for a drive. So we'll do account ID, org ID, project ID. We'll take the transaction amount in here. And I'm going to just switch to page preview mode and show you, here's a list of my accounts. You'll notice that the join with project ID, I can see that there are some null values, but now I can also pull things like the account name and add it to my account ID, and it should match them up. I can go to my orgs and pull the org name and add it to my org ID. And the reason these are matching up is because I did and defined the joins between the GL Postsum org ID and the organization stable org ID. And I did the same thing for accounts. And I'll do the same thing for projects as well. So I can pull the project name. And if I wanted additional demographic information like project type description, project classification, I can actually add those as well. And so now I can test drive my my data modules, validate the data. This is the GL Postsum amount, but I can also come in here and validate, for example, instead of pulling the GL Postsum data, I can actually test the join between GL Postsum and GL Detail and pull that amount into my report as well. Okay, and I'm going to add a subtotal to this to validate the numbers further. Click OK. And you notice here that my total is 0, which in the world of general ledger is a good thing. That just means that all of my transactions against all of my accounts, orgs, and projects add up to 0, which means that my general ledger is in balance and there's nothing wacky going on with my joins or anything like that. Okay. All right. Couple of other things I'm going to do here. I am going to organize this a little bit further and even simplify it a little bit more. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add one more data source. So let's say, for example, somebody says, hey, I like the general ledger data module that you created for me, but I also need some labor history reporting. Can we extend that functionality? So actually, I can come back here and click on add new sources and come back to the system and select additional tables to bring in, or select additional information that I might have somewhere else, like external data. In this instance, I'm going to select labor history and do an import of that. And you'll notice Cognos will bring that labor history in here as a table, as a standalone table. And I can come in here again, organize where it appears, rename it. Okay. And I can also click on the grid to see the data that it brings in. So you'll see here, I have org ID, org name, project ID, project name. So it looks like my labor history data that's coming in is already organized. I already have my name. I could, if I wanted to, do the additional joins for the account attributes, the org attributes, and the project attributes. But it looks like these are done for me. And this could technically be a standalone. So I can come back here and click on try it one more time just to check, make sure everything looks good, and Cognos will launch. Notice I'm going through this iterative process. It is considered kind of like a best practice to test your data module as you go along to validate and make sure things look good. But now you can see here that I've added labor history for my users, and now they can pull labor history type data, and we can see what it looks like inside of a report. Everything looks good, and we are good to go. All right. Doing a quick time check here, so I only have a few more minutes, but what I want to do now is I want to make things a little bit easier. When we actually clicked on try it, remember we were pulling data from GL Postsum, we were pulling data from GL Detail, we were pulling account attributes from account, and there was a lot of noise here. There was a lot of fields that are potentially maybe not so useful to end users. Maybe they can ignore them. So if I wanted to improve this and even make it simpler for my end users, I can do another thing that a data module allows you to do, which is this ability to create custom tables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate the GL PostSummary, GL Detail, and my account, org, and project attributes into one table to even simplify things further for my end users. So I'll just click on Create Custom Table, and I'm going to select the tables here that I want to include. As you can see, you have several options here. You can create a join view. You can create a view of a table, which is basically a subset of the data if you like. You can create unions, you can create except tables, intersect tables. You can create a copy of a table and derive additional data from it. So I'm going to click on select tables, and I want to select my GL Postsum, accounts, orgs, and projects. These are the tables I'm interested in. And based on that selection, and based on the fact that I've joined all of these tables in my data module, the only option I can have for this instance is to create a view of my tables. Had I imported tables from a database, for example, I could have created copies and joined tables and views and unions of those. But since these are uploaded files, I'm limited to create a view. So I'm going to select that option and click on next. And Cognos assumes that I want all of these tables, but I'm going to create just a subset of the data. But I'm going to call this new view just GL data in general. And I'm going to uncheck all of those tables. And now I'm going to bring in the GL Postsum PostSummary. I'm going to grab account ID, org ID, project ID, fiscal year, and period. And I'm going to bring in, ignore the rest of those. I'm going to go to my general ledger detail, and I'm going to bring in the ID, the ID type. I'll bring in the person's name, individual name. Might have to do the journal entry number. So you can pick and choose whatever fields you want to show folks. I'll bring in my measures, amount, and hours. And then if I go down to accounts, for my accounts, I'm only interested in my account name. So I'll bring that in. For my orgs, I'll bring in the account or the org name. Okay, and of course you can bring in any of the other fields. And for projects, I'm going to just bring in the project name. I'll bring in the type, and we'll do the classification as well. Okay. I'll hit refresh here just to get a sampling of my data. And you'll see these are all the fields that I brought in into this custom view that I'm calling GL data. So I'll click on finish, and now you'll see Cognos will show you that the GL data view is based on all of these tables brought in together based on what I did to join them all together. And you'll see here that I have the GL data derived, and I have account ID, org ID, and project. And I can come in here and rearrange these fields as well in the order that I like. So I can grab org name and project name, project classification, project type, okay? And then I have my ID type, ID, fiscal year period. I'll grab the name and put that after ID, journal entry, and my amount and hours. So now when I publish or use this data module, I'm going to see GL data as well as all the other tables. But I can even take it a step further and remove this extra noise from the users. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on new and create a folder. And I'm going to call it hidden objects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of these fields that are no longer necessary for this purpose and move them into hidden objects. And then I'm going to change the property of this folder and hide it from my users. So now when you run or use this data module, you're only going to see the GL data and the labor history that I have exposed. So I'll save the data module here, and then we'll go take it for a spin. And you'll see here that the only fields that we see, or the only subject areas we see, are the GL data that we created and our labor history. And again, I can grab these items now for my reporting purposes and change the view to page preview. And you'll see that I'll get all of my accounts. I can do sorting, slicing, and dicing. My account names listed, orgs, org names, all nice and clean, simplified, removed all the clutter, all the noise, and pulled in the information for all of my transactions. And again, if I add a subtotal to amount, it should hopefully end up being a total of 0. So I'm going to page down here. I have a lot more detail, but you see that my number is still 0, which is a good way to validate and check. Okay. Doing a quick time check here. I want to save some time for some questions, but I just want to do one more thing real quick. Again, you saw how we are able to hide objects. We're able to organize, rename, but we can also do calculations here. Let's see here. Fiscal year period. We have amounts and hours. Let's say, for example, we do have amounts and hours as measures. We can take the amount, assuming that there are hours associated with it, and do a calculation. For example, we can do amount divided by hours to get the rate. And as you can see, we have an expression editor here. I'll bet a big expression editor here. But this is basically looks a lot like the Report Studio or the report authoring tool expression editor. You have access to your other components of the data module. You also have access to all of the functions like the vendor specific functions, common functions that are available to us in Cognos. You can build your expression, you can drag and drop, do additional data derivations, you can do validation, you can even preview the data. So you can validate here. And whenever you're ready, you can click OK. And that should add the custom calculation under GL data here, right here, the rate that we created. And when I click on try it, I would have to expose that under GL data. Actually, I did put it under GL data. So if I click on try it now in the tool, you'll see that under GL data, we have the rate item in here. I'm not sure if it's going to be a legit calculation, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We need to clean up the data. Page preview. All right, so some instances we do have, and of course I'll do the math and validate those numbers, but looks like we're a little bit off because we're adding the rate, right? The rate, that's an error, that should not be a total. So we'll have to change that to a none, and that should give us an actual rate of the 160. That looks about right. All right, that's kind of a deep dive that is time limited. There's so much more that we can cover, but I want to leave a few minutes here before we wrap up. We only have another 7 minutes or so to hopefully answer any questions that somebody might have. So I will, Don, I'm not sure how do you want to do that?
So Tafik, thanks very much. I put a note into the chat where anyone could put their questions into the Q&A area within Zoom, and we can try to answer those as they come in. We have a couple that have already come in, Tafik, so I'll go ahead and rattle those off to you. The first one is, how are the data modules different from Costpoint tables?
They're actually not different. The only thing, data modules just gives you the ability to do more if you want to do more, or if you are looking to integrate data from other sources with your Costpoint tables. What I've done in this data module is actually use Costpoint tables. I just did a little trick by exporting the data in Excel, just for demo purposes, trying to avoid Murphy's Law here. But if you connect directly to Costpoint tables, you can use those Costpoint tables to derive additional data. For example, if you want to write a report against just what I did here against the general ledger data, you're going to have to, in the package itself or the tables that are coming, you're going to have to bring in the project name or any of those attributes manually. But what I did here is I took what was already in place and extended it by simplifying it, doing the joins behind the scenes, and then presenting one final data output for my end users to simplify. So technically, they're not really different. It's just another way of presenting the data and organizing the data and extending the data. A couple of things, you might be using different modules within Costpoint where the data might be in separate functional areas. For example, you're trying to report on something that's based on the GL, but also based on project data. And so you want to bring that data together. You can bring the cost point tables in here, do the relationships and the joins, and then extend that functionality, basically create a one-stop shop for that subject area that you're trying to report on. I see also, I'm looking at the questions, so I'll also see one of the questions from Esther. I never set the relationship between labor history and the other tables. In this instance, I was wanting to show you that you don't have to define that join, that the tables, if you have a subject area that can stand alone, you don't have to do a join there. My labor history portion here is self-contained. It already had all the attributes that I'm interested in. So I was just trying to demonstrate that you don't have to do a join for every table. It could be a standalone subject area that you can organize in your data module. When uploading files, are there limitations, quantity, and size? There really isn't, but I would not want to upload a table that is 1 million rows, right? You're going to hit performance issues and things like that. But per se, the limitations that are placed on the size of a file and the total volume of the files that you can upload are limited by your vendor in the cloud. The default, I think, is like an Excel file that I think is 50K in size, or I think they might have changed it to 100K. But and, you know, unless you have extremely large volumes of data, you're probably not going to hit limits to quantity and size. But obviously, you know, the more you have, the slower it could be. But I think it'll be a while before you hit those limits. So Jenna wants to know if this will be a recording, and the answer is yes, we are recording it and more than happy to share it as well. Okay. Another question I see here, can you see all the tables in the database? You can see all the tables in the database if you load the schema. There's a setup that an administrator would have to do when they create that data server connection. And you can choose to load all of the cost point schema if you want to, or you can just load a subset of that schema. For folks that are hosted on the Deltek cloud, that data server connection, I think, is a feature that is going to be coming soon. I don't think it's quite there yet. For folks that might be in other hosting sites or on-premise, if you have an administrator or someone who's at administrator level, they can determine which part of the schema they load. And then Cognos, when it creates a data module, will read that schema to try to interpret the relationship between the tables, to expose the tables and the fields to you as well. How can you use an external Excel file with a reporting package? So this is why you do need a data module. You can't incorporate an Excel file with a reporting package. In version 10 of Cognos, you could upload an Excel file, join it to your reporting package, and then republish that package, but that's gone away. You can upload an Excel file and use it immediately in a dashboard without having to do anything else. So you can have that Excel file become a source for your dashboard. However, if you want to use it in a report, you have to put that Excel file into a data module, just like I did here. All of these files were Excel files. I loaded them up into a data module, and then I was able to use them in the report authoring tool, or I can use this data module as a data source for a dashboard. Just like you saw here, this is kind of report authoring mini, but I'm using that Excel data file as a source. Someone's asking for Deltek Cloud clients, are they making the source data servers available in a future release? I think they are. I can't speak for Deltek, but what I heard in Project Con is that it is something that they are working on. I think they have a few things to address with multi-tenancy and security, but I think they are working on it. But again, I don't want to speak for them or what they're planning on doing. So maybe reach out to your contacts at Deltek, and hopefully they'll have more information on that. Can you bring in data from external source like SQL Server into Costpoint data modules? If your Cognos environment can connect to that SQL server and you are licensed to connect to multiple data sources, you can absolutely do that. You expose that SQL Server database as a data source, as a data server, and you can incorporate that. So from a technical standpoint, it's not a limitation, but it's going to depend on where your Costpoint instance is. And if you are on premise then, and you are licensed and so on and so forth. So it's not a technical challenge, it's more of a licensing and location challenge, but you can do that. Not only that, but in data modules, you can actually write your own SQL statements. And this is not in this version, but in the next version of Cognos, you can write SQL statements to bring in tables from a SQL source into a data module. Question was, do we need to check on this data modules when we upgrade our Costpoint or Cognos? I would certainly make that more of a part of an upgrade, is to kind of make sure that it still works and you still get expected results. I think conceivably, there could be some things that might change, and you can actually, you would include them as part of your UAT or testing during your testing phase. Yes, the recording will be available, and I think we can send that out. And then Pam wants to know if we can call the Costpoint tables through SQL. I think you will eventually in the next release, more possibly so. I have seen it with 11.2. I don't think it's readily available in 11.1.7. And again, depending on where you are, whether you're hosted in the cloud, there might be some security limitations to that. There also could be challenges, for example, with from a personally identifiable information and sensitive information thing, but you can do select star from MPL or select star from Postsum and retrieve the data. So you'll be able to do that. So Pam, if you're on-prem, I think you have full carte blanche to do a lot of these things that you want to do there. Let's see here. Phil is having a SQL query plan error when trying to do a cross-tab report on a large number of records from a single view, although it works fine for a list report and also SSMS. Do you know if I can work around this issue by creating a data module and then using that data as a source for my cross-tab report? That is a very good question, and I think it might be a worthwhile endeavor to do that. The other thing that you can do, Phil, is take advantage of data sets. We don't talk too much about data sets, but data sets can also be used inside of a data module. We're thinking about exploring data sets for our next webinar if there's interest in those. But data sets in about 10 seconds or less let you pre-position data ahead of time, so you can actually update your data inside of Cognos, run it maybe at 6 o'clock in the morning, get a subset of that data that you need for that crosstab, and then use that as a source. So to answer your question, Phil, I would say it might be worthwhile. Maybe just do a small subset or a quick prototype and give that a shot and see if that solves the problem. My pleasure, Annie. Thanks. Good to see you. How do we append current data when importing Excel file? That part is handled in Cognos itself and not necessarily inside of the data module. If you go to a file, for example, hopefully you can still see my screen, my GL data Excel file here, for example, if I click on the More button, I can do a replace file, or I can do an append file, and that's what takes care of that Excel file update. Okay. Can we import Excel data from externally? Absolutely. That's what I did here. I'm assuming externally means from an external source. You would still have to upload them manually into Cognos. I don't think there's a way to automate that unless you possibly use the SDK. There might be some provisions in the software development kit where you can do this programmatically. Get your Excel file from somewhere and then use the SDK to import it into Cognos. But as far as the interface, you would have to come up here and do upload files, and then upload your file, and then you can append it over time or replace it over time. Okay. I think I covered a lot of those questions here. Anything else? We're a few minutes over, so I want to thank everybody for their time. If there are any other questions, feel free to email or reach out to me or Don. And I think, Don, we're going to make this presentation available for folks if they want to explore it again.
Yes, we'll make the presentation and the recording available to everyone as they're interested. Tafik, if you wouldn't mind going back to that slide deck just momentarily, just a couple of quick slides to wrap up.
Yep.
Right, so we've done the questions. Again, just a reminder, obviously we've got a tremendous amount of experience around Costpoint BI, Cognos Analytics, as you've seen from Tafik today and his team. But we've got a lot of other areas where we're helping support our clients in the government contracting industry. So please reach out if you ever have a need for any of our services. And then finally, that last slide, Tafik, as you mentioned, this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to either of us or visit our website. If you have any questions, we're happy to follow up and have some additional conversations around those. So again, thank you all very much for your attendance today. We really appreciate your interest, all the great questions and your engagement. And we look forward to seeing you on the next NeoSystems webinar very soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming.